Good evening on this third day of August 2014. You're watching Ebro Africa Prime Team News, and we have a lot lined up for you tonight, including
what we have done through our airlines that go to the West African part of this country. People as they're being checked in, they're observed by the airline staff.
Kenya takes precautionary measures against Ebola as more 21 bodies are collected in Liberia. More than 3,000 homes destroyed as floods wreak havoc in Sudan. The United States is welcome to help Kenya as Uhuru Kenyatta heads to the US-Africa Leaders Summit. And no more space to bury the dead in Gaza as Israel vows to continue with the incursion. Thanks for joining us. I'm Sam Gakunyi. In our top story, Kenya is the largest economy in East Africa means there is enormous movement of people through the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, making the country a major transport hub for the region. But the country is continuing to take precautionary steps to ensure that it remains free of the deadly Ebola virus. The outbreak of the virus in West Africa has so far killed more than 700 people in 4 other African countries.
There have so far been no suspected Ebola cases in Kenya, and authorities say there is little threat from the virus.
Still staying with Ebola, the stigma of the deadly virus is deepening across the world. It is even more deepening in Liberia. A team of health workers and government officials collected 21 bodies of Ebola victims at a hospital morgue in Monrovia to bury them at a dedicated site under controlled conditions. And this is why the site had to be controlled. Fears of catching the disease by villagers as the victims are buried.
While hospital morgues in Liberia fill up with Ebola victims, burial teams are chased out of neighborhoods by people fearing infection.
Moving on, investigations at the crash site of Air Algeria flight AH5017, which crashed in Mali last week, have come to an end. The area is still littered with debris, but all items belonging to survivors have been removed from the site. 116 people died in the crash.
The death toll in the crash of an Air Algeria flight in Mali last week.
Moving on, time and again, the youth have been advised to explore ways in which they are able to employ themselves as opposed to waiting on white-collar jobs. With more than 70% of the Kenyan unemployed being the youth, efforts to reduce this number still appear to be futile. But a number of students from the Technical University of Kenya have resorted to innovations not only to try and solve daily problems, but also with hopes to make a living out of it once they are done with school. Our report tonight from Akisa Wandera.
The Innovators Club has been home for these young men and women since they joined the Technical University of
President Uhuru Kenyatta will be accompanied by a delegation of 40 people in his trip to Washington, D.C., USA, in a trip that will focus on strengthening ties between the U.S. and Kenya in trade, capital investment, infrastructure, energy, and security. The president was invited by the Obama administration alongside other 50 African leaders for the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit.
The US-Africa Leaders Summit marks the first time an American president will convene Africa's leaders at one conference.
Now, US President Barack Obama will host the first ever US-Africa Leaders Summit in Washington from tomorrow, with insecurity in East Africa as one of the prime topics to be discussed. The insecurity menace is perpetuated by Al-Shabaab, who today have killed 3 women in the Somalia capital Mogadishu and wounding 7 others when a remotely detonated bomb exploded in a busy market.
In recent weeks, Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab insurgents have increased gun and bomb attacks in Mogadishu.
Up north, more than 3,000 homes have been destroyed by floods that hit almost half of Sudan's states over the last few days, as Khartoum state declared a high state of alert after heavy rains hit the area, with donor organizations planning to provide aid to those affected by the floods.
There were 184 injuries during the deluge, which affected around 6,000.
The social impact of the Libya conflict is not flowing into Tunisia as it reopens its main crossing point with Libya, allowing a few hundred people to come in and escape from clashes in Libya. This even as the international community is on the last haul of evacuees.
A lucky few flee Libya's nightmare to reach Tunisia. Baby on her shoulder, suitcase in hand, Khadija, a 34-year-old Tunisian.
With casualties in their thousands and strong calls from the international community for a humanitarian ceasefire, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel maintains its stand and that it will keep up its military campaign against Hamas in Gaza for as long and as forcefully as needed.
Israel will keep up its military campaign against Hamas in Gaza as long and as forceful as needed, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Still in Gaza, the situation there is worsening day by day. The Israeli offensive in that strip has flooded hospitals and overwhelmed rescue workers, but the tragedy of conflict is more apparent in the cemeteries where space is running out. To an extent, old graves are opened for new burials. And that's all we had for you on today's edition of Hebrew Africa Primetime News. Many thanks for watching. I'm Sam Gakunyi. I leave you with tomorrow's weather forecast.